Welcome to the Cre Syndicate Show, sponsored by PREIshare and Family Office Insights, where we'll discuss passive investing and syndicated real estate with industry leaders and special guests. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cre Syndicate. I'm Julie Tallman, and I'm with Christian Sadler.
Hey, everybody.
This is the Cre Syndicate is sponsored by PREIshare, and we're actually at the PREIshare sponsored podcast booth at the Best Ever Conference, which I'm seriously telling you really is the best ever conference if you're in real estate syndication. And I would like to introduce two very important passive investors, Shalabh and Eesha Moonat. And we're going to talk today about syndication just from their point of view, what's happening. So, Christian, is there a shakeup today, or do we just get to dive in?
I think we're going to skip the shakeup on this one. We're going to jump right into it because I think this is a special episode. A lot of people don't get to put themselves in the mind of a passive investor. And Shalabh, you have such an interesting story where your dad immigrated here and created wealth for the family. You were able to be the second recipient of that, but you also have been very successful in your own career along with your siblings. And so essentially now you're creating third generation with Eesha with your wealth. And it's kind of interesting to see how you make decisions. And I would just love to maybe start off by hearing that story of your family, and we can go into it from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us. This is great. I've never been to Best Ever Conference, so really appreciate the invite. My dad came over in the 60s to get his PhD and then went to work for NASA and decided that he was going to start his own company, and so started a couple of jewelry businesses. We were always net savers and investors, and as I kind of grew up around that, was really excited to kind of take the reins and started investing when I was maybe 18 or 19 years old. Got really lucky, and it was kind of the dot-com boom, so literally throw a dart and you could win, but learned some lessons the hard way around that as well. And then over the last about 20 years, we've done a lot more private investments, so private VC, real estate, private equity, things like that. I recently, left my job and am now really focused on, the family business and the family office, and have been really excited to introduce that to my kids as well. So I have a 12-year-old who's in California right now, and Eesha's here. She's 17, and she's been joining me on investor calls, and it's been really kind of a fun ride. And I've kind of seen the real estate side of this from a lot of different angles. We've owned real estate outright. We've done some syndications. We've done some TIC investments, and I've figured out what works for me and for our family, and really helps us kind of achieve our goals of long-term growth and intergenerational wealth transfer. We just kind of do stuff that I think is really, boring, but works. I think it's exciting, but most people look at it and they think it's pretty boring. So,
well, I'm one of the people that would think it was exciting because I'm a real estate nerd. So I love what it is that you're doing. So I would love for you to step into some of that. How do you make those decisions? What are some reasons that you've chosen to be more passive in real estate or active at times? And what's the kind of long-term vision of how you transfer? Because one of the first times we talked, you were mentioning that you're heavily invested in equities and you want to transfer that and be more evenly distributed into real estate specifically. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we've done really well in equities, just, right place, right time. We've had some individual equity investments that have been like 100x investments for us in public equities, and that's great. But they're not tax advantaged in any way. So anytime we sell one of those investments, there's massive tax implications to that, and being able to redistribute that becomes really complicated. I had a great real estate mentor by the name of Jeff Schwartz, who's the reason that my family moved to California. And he was trying to get me into real estate for a really, really long time. And he's done these passive deals. But I kind of call it active passive investing. And so we're very active on the front end of it. and then very passive, right? So we're active in selecting the property, selecting the sponsor, making sure that the terms kind of meet with what we're looking for, that we think the macro climate, is where we want it to be and rates are where we want them to be and things like that. But then we really rely on sponsors to make sure that, the properties actually perform the way that we expect them to, and then we kind of hold them to that. I think we've selected really well. I've gone out to see every single investment that I've made so far. Like I've flown out, spent time, checking out the property, making sure that, the things that are stated in the investment decks actually make sense. We've done a lot of value add, like that's primarily where we've made our money in real estate. And so I kind of love that C plus to B minus property that you can turn into, a B plus kind of property and then flip it and do it all over again. That's just worked really well for us. We don't like coupon clipping. And like I said, for us, it's always been about, the next generation, right? Like, as you mentioned, like we've been really fortunate to do really well in our own right. So, I was always in tech sales. My brother's an ER doc. My parents had the businesses. So the investments were just like kind of what you do with capital, but it's not something that my family relies on for income. It's not something that we've ever earmarked for use in any way. And so when I have sponsors that talk to me about time horizon, they're like, hey, we might be able to get your money back in 3 years. I'm like, you can hang on to it for as long as you want, as long as you're compounding capital the way that, we want to.
Yeah.
But for that reason, we've structured things, very specifically. So we only go into deals where we can have a tick position. We only do deals where we select the real estate. We're not, married to a sponsor, right? If they perform well and they've got a good deal, on exit, then we'll do another deal with them. And we've done that a number of times, right? We've gone full cycle with sponsors and we've reinvested those proceeds with them again and again. But sometimes, we don't. Sometimes there are better deals out there and we, kind of move our money out to someone else. And, you were asking the question about why passive and not active. And it's just because we've always had other things that we wanted to focus on, right?
You don't like doing plumbing?
I love doing plumbing,
Wow.
but when I was a kid, my parents owned a duplex, and we did everything for that duplex.
Okay.
When the toilets broke, we were out there. When it was ready for turnover, we were the ones that were painting it. The roof was leaking. We were out on the roof with tar, and yeah, that was very, very active. But my passion was in tech, and my brother's passion was in medicine, and my parents didn't want to have anything to do with anything. So, passive investing was just a much, much better way to do it. And the other thing I realized is the quality of the assets are a lot better, and the specific niche that we found in like the investment world really works for us, right? Like we love the 15 to $20 million building that you can turn into a 40 or $50 million building. You're buying it from, a family and you're selling it to an institution. It's a good way to compress cap rates and, really get an outsized return to the market. And while we've been doing this, like that walk has just worked really well. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of times people don't realize that they could get into the passive investing. So they have a career of some sort that's paying them very well, and they're being told from multiple sources they need to get invested into real estate. And then they show up at a conference and they say, hey, you're going to fix and flip this property, or you're going to get into nightly rentals. And they're essentially buying another job, and that's what most people don't want to do. They're ultimately trying to invest for the potential freedom that it can provide for them. So I'm glad that you guys found that out early. It sounds like your mom and dad, cut their teeth on the active side, and you guys got to learn from that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Shalabh, I respect so much that you feel the stewardship over wealth and the fact that you're even saying generational wealth. And I told Eesha, I said, look, you're getting the best college/business education right now available to man. So just soak it up. With Eesha and anybody else young, maybe looking to get into real estate, what do you want her to know right now? What are you hoping that she observes? Obviously, there are pitfalls that she'll learn from you, but what's imperative for her to be observing right now?
I mean, the things that are really important to me when we make a new investment is that we invest with people that are like-minded and people that we trust to operate the properties. And I tell Eesha all the time, I say, look, it's like a marriage, right? It you know, you sign partnership documents, right? And you're stuck with these people for a very long time. Most of these investments are going to be 5 years, some are going to be 10 years, some are going to be even longer than that. So you want to make sure that these are people that you can trust to do the right thing when you're not, you know, there. That's the number one thing. And I learned that from my dad. You know, in his jewelry business, you know, they would transact you know, very, very large sums of money. And he said it was purely trust. And I used to ask him all the time, like, you know, you're buying like a bag of diamonds or a bag of rubies or something like that. You don't have the time to check every one that you're buying, and you're paying cash for these things. And often you're not, right? So he would tell me these stories about, you know, going to somebody's shop and picking up, you know, a bag of rubies or diamonds that were like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then just walking out the door. And I'm like, wait, you didn't pay him anything? He's like, yeah, I'll pay him. And I'm like, how does he know you're going to pay him? Like, it's just trust, right? And like, I've taken that forward into everything that we've done, in that every single deal that we've done has been with someone who I've sat down with. I know them, I know their kids, they know my kids. Like, we're really getting into business together.
Your
So
bags of diamonds just have roofs.
they're just different. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, like, that's one thing that Eesha's really learned. I mean, she's gotten to meet all of the people that we're working with. You know, Christian and Mike have been over to our house, and we, you know, the four of us sat down and had a conversation about, you know, investing. And they were like, what's the 17-year-old doing here, right?
No, and I was so impressed, I do have to say. From the very beginning, I was very impressed that, first of all, that you were there, and then that you were picking up on a lot of the terms. And I know you have some interesting stories of how you learned some of those terms, but, you know, for you to be in that, what does it feel like to be in these meetings, these investment meetings at your age?
I mean, sitting in on a lot of these meetings from the time where I was a very, very little child. I remember my dad driving me to school in the morning and being on phone calls, and I remember hearing all these little bits of terminology and things that he was doing in deals and what he was doing when he worked in software sales. So I've always been a part of that, and for me right now, it's been really great to start learning how to do what I'm going to have to do when I eventually take over our real estate and our finances. And I just think it's been a really great opportunity for me ever since I was a little girl.
Yeah. Is there some pressure there? I mean, I think that, you know, you think about that third generation, you hope that they keep the wealth.
Absolutely. Like, I feel like you guys probably know what they say. You know, it's the first generation that makes the wealth, and the second generation that keeps it going, and the third generation that squanders it. And I don't want to be that generation. You know, I
Good for
think
you.
it's the same with my brother. Um, he's not here right now, but I love the little guy, and we don't want to be that generation.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys were telling me a funny story about sitting with a big firm, and I don't know what age it was that you were there, but I'd love to maybe share that story with the audience.
Yeah, so I believe it was with Morgan Stanley. Yeah, we were in this meeting, and I was sitting in on this. And there were so many terms that were just flying over my head, and I did not understand most of it. And you know, someone stopped and they said, "Hey, do you understand any of this?" And I said, "No, I have no idea what you just said." And they stopped the meeting and started explaining these things to me. And I know that that never would have really happened if it wasn't for my dad and how he does what he does. But I'm really thankful that I got the opportunity to kind of learn from people who really know what they're doing, and that they see that I'm not afraid to admit this. I'm just a kid right now, and I'm still learning.
So, what's the scariest term that you've learned that you now go, I know what that means?
Oh, I think it's gotta be securitized debt instruments.
Oh.
Like, why? I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
why can't they just say, you don't pay me back, I'm gonna take your house?
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying that, right?
I guess so.
And I think it's so impressive for anybody that when you're sitting in the room, because you are there and you're paying attention, and it's not like you're there bored. And when we were having that meeting, I kind of had that same pull of like, hey, Eesha, do you understand why your dad's asking these questions about 1031 exchange and tick? And I mean, luckily by then it seems like you were pretty astute and you were able to know most of what was happening there.
Just a little bit. I try.
Yeah, very cool. So what does the next 5 to 10 years look like for you guys?
I mean, lather, rinse, repeat, right? Like, we make small adjustments here and there. We're really trying to move a lot more of our money into real estate. It's just hard because there isn't a real tax efficient way to do it. So as we kind of look at legacy planning and, doing intergenerational wealth transfer, it's complicated by, the tax issues that we're going to face. But I definitely think that for our family, real estate's going to play a really large part of the next 5 to 10 years. So we're evaluating a lot of deals. I probably look at 2 or 3 deals a week. We only do a couple of deals a year, but the deals that we do are pretty large swaths of capital for the family. So I want to make sure that they're the right deals with the right sponsors, like I've talked about. I have this dream that we'll have like 50% of our assets in real estate. We've never gotten anywhere near that, but we're getting closer. So I would say, just progress on kind of that goal.
Yeah.
And, really just focused on, are there changes that we should be making, right? Like right now, we're primarily invested in multifamily, but I'm really interested in self-storage, for example. Like, I think the demographics really support, kind of a shift into, higher returns in self-storage. We don't really like commercial, but, prices for commercial have dropped so much. Like, is there an opportunity there to, maybe put some money into commercial? Things of that nature. We've toyed around with, structures and things like that. Christian, you and I have talked about why I don't like funds, for example. It's just because I want to select the real estate, right?
Yeah.
Like, in a fund, I don't really get a chance to do that.
Well, and I think a lot of syndicators should hear this because it's being very highly promoted out there that you should get into a fund because then you just have to raise the money one time and you get to turn it over. But there's a lot of very astute investors like yourself that are going to say, maybe if you move to that structure, I'm not going to continue to invest because you want to be very active, like you said, on the front end. You want to choose the real estate. You want to touch it, feel it, make sure that this is something that you feel comfortable putting your family's wealth in.
Yeah, I mean, the sponsor that we've done the most deals with has moved away from being able to do TIC investments and into like purely a DST and then a fund structure. And I told them it just wasn't going to work for us. So as we go full cycle on deals, we're going to move capital away. And I love them. I mean, they've been great to work with. They've been fantastic at, preserving kind of the goals that we have for our family. But now they're changing their business model. And, I've sort of like gone back to them multiple times and said, hey, is there any wiggle room here? I mean, like, give us a tick right alongside your DST and your fund, and like we're golden. But it's just not the model that they want to do moving forward. But that's okay. I mean, like, I don't begrudge them that. I mean, if that's the business they want to run, I mean, that's fantastic. And obviously, there are a lot of people that will do that with them. But most of my close, real estate network just won't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like I said, my real estate mentor's been doing this a long time. He's not moving to that structure. I'm not moving to that structure. None of my friends, that are in real estate want to do that because they just want more control of where their capital is going to go and be able to be nimble. And the whole idea that if I want to move away from a sponsor means that all of a sudden I'm paying capital gains tax, 3 turns into a deal, like it doesn't make sense for us. So. There are sponsors out there that will do hybrid structures though, which I'm finding is not advertised, but if you talk to them, they'll definitely do it, especially if you've got, the capital that would typically support a TIC structure. So there's a lot of sponsors where, they've got the marketing machine running and, they've got their fund that they're doing. And, breaking through that marketing machine to someone who can actually make a decision on this is a little bit more complicated. But as soon as I get on the phone with a principal, it's like a 15-minute conversation. And 99% of the time, the answer is yes. I think I've only been turned down one time recently when I said, hey, like, I want to invest with you. I don't like your fee structure. I don't like your fund structure, but we can certainly find some way to work together, and they're normally very, very happy to do it. And then the cool thing about that is that then they're bringing me deals that they're not marketing, right? So I get first bite at the apple then. And so that's a really cool position to be in as well. They're like, hey, we haven't started the marketing on this. Why don't we figure out like what you want to do with it, and then we can sort of backfill with our other investors or backfill with the fund. So that's been really exciting, and I didn't expect that when I kind of started having these types of conversations. So
Yeah, that makes sense. It puts you in a good negotiation spot, and I'll give a little plug here because PREIshare now has kind of stepped into this role of when somebody comes to us and they're looking to place a 1031, for example. We know so many good sponsors, and oftentimes they're not advertising that they're willing to take 1031 because it takes some additional maneuvering, but we can make those introductions. And luckily with the 1031, that turns into just a standard real estate transaction. So we can usually work out compensation that doesn't put us being involved in their deal in any sense of the way, or in your money for that matter. Now I'm curious because I was talking to a gentleman. He was actually speaking on stage a few days ago at a different conference, and he was mentioning that he's had some people that come to him typically with a 1031, and he's willing to work it out, but he's figured out that in some cases, with cost segregation and that front-loaded depreciation, he's been able to help them reset their basis so they don't have to be trapped into that 1031, always in that tight timeline of deciding what that next deal is. Have you guys looked into that at all? Does it factor in with how many times you guys have turned the money over?
we've definitely looked at it, but from our perspective, like driving that basis as negative as possible, and then having an intergenerational transfer, which basically steps up the basis, is so much a better way to go. I basically get to double dip, right? I get to keep the bonus depreciation against, any distributed capital, and I still get the ability to make that transfer. Man, that 45-day window is hard though.
Yeah.
And I mean, my last deal closed in the middle of December, so I lost basically 3 weeks, before everybody was back to work, and so now I'm down to 30 days, and luckily it all worked out. We just, closed that transaction in Florida, but yeah,
Congratulations.
it's a tight timeline, and then making sure that everything happens is hard, and especially when you're working with other ticks, like that becomes complicated as well. I mean, probably not now, but I should tell you the story about this deal that we did in Florida. Like it was very, very interesting, all of the moving parts and all the parties that were involved. And I'm really, really glad that we were able to get it done. And I'm really happy with all the work that the sponsors did. It was a deal with Topaz, great guys. So but it can be very complicated. And I get approached by people that have all kinds of things that they want to try to like move us into instead of a 1031 exchange. I have people that have come with us with like installment sale trusts, and you've got all this uncaptured depreciation, like you could use that on this particular deal and not have to do it, and then you can move that into something. And I'm just like, I mean, like to me, keeping this money exchanging over and over and over again and just driving that basis down and waiting for that step up is fine. Like I just don't see any reason not to do it.
Yeah, and especially, you guys have such a unique position. Again, you're investing money that you probably never need for yourself. So you're really looking at this of how can you maximize that transfer on down the road. That makes a lot of sense. I do want to hear that deal someday because
Anytime.
I know that we were trying to help you, find some opportunities during that time. And unfortunately, with the time window, people just weren't getting docs to us fast enough that we could get them to you. And glad you got something closed.
It was a scary couple of months. Like I was, like the backstop was that we do have a lot of unused depreciation that we would have used for this deal, but I didn't want to give it up. And so I'm really happy that it worked out the way that it did.
Kind of feels like it's almost like a game now, right?
100%.
What you're doing.
Well, and so, you were asking like, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like? And, part of it's about, like Eesha and my son Avi and like getting them kind of involved in the business more and more. I mean, assuming that they're interested in it, which, so far it seems like a reasonable thing. But also like, I have a lot of friends from the tech world that really have, very little idea how to do this. So in the deal in Florida, I actually have three very good friends who haven't done this kind of deal before, who actually came in on the deal with us. And it was a really interesting process to go through with them. You know, two of them basically said, "Oh, if you're going in on the deal, like just let me know where to send my money, and it's fine." And the third one is one of the most analytical people I've ever met. She doesn't really know real estate that well, but she's incredibly intelligent. I mean, she read every doc, every comp. Like, we must have had like 5, 6, 7 phone calls. You know, I connected her with the sponsor. She was like, you know, debating which structure to use and what to do and how much to put in. And I mean, it was really fun
It's
to
a
watch.
great person to have on your team.
Oh my God, it was so fun to watch, right? Because like she just went down to a level of detail that it was great to kind of see her questions and all of that. But it also just kind of led me to the idea that like most people, uh, it's like really daunting to do that, right? And you know that like financial education or real estate education, it's really hard to come by. So I've been really enjoying that aspect of this as well. It's just like, hey, you know, if you're friends and family and you're interested in doing these kinds of deals, like let's spend some time on it. And you know, hopefully pretty soon Eesha will start taking those calls. So.
Yeah. Eesha, when do you start making decisions on these things?
I have no idea right now. For the foreseeable future, I'm just going to be sitting in on those calls, soaking up all that knowledge and information until I can hopefully start taking over those calls. But right now, I have no idea.
Is there a favorite transaction that you've done that you've been able to observe?
Um, I mean, this isn't a real estate thing, but I forget how old I was. It was when my dad was still working for Appian, I think. He was on the verge of closing a really big deal, and I remember being in the car and listening to those conversations. And I drew a graph and my dad holding 2 sacks of money. And we like to say that's what closed the deal.
It was great.
Yeah, love that.
I sent it to the procurement guy and I was like, I mean, you see the numbers on her graph, they're way bigger than my graph, so you should take my deal. And he did.
I love that. That's very cool. So if you were going to give advice to a friend that came to you that was going to be investing passively in real estate for the very first time, but they were thinking about this long term, I mean, literally for the next generation, what would be some important piece of advice that you would give them?
Oh man. You know, I think the thing that kind of screams at me about this kind of stuff is, you know, kind of what Warren Buffett said, right? He's like, look, if you're going to do this in a professional way, then, you know, really focus in on a couple of transactions that you really like and think are going to be outsized. And that's really kind of where we're focused. If you're going to be truly passive and you're just going to be throwing off, you know, like retail size checks, as much as I hate funds, you know, and REITs like are not my favorite thing, and you know, I don't like the fees and I don't like the tax treatment. There's like so much about I don't like about it. But if you're going to be, you know, sending in retail size checks and you're going to just like go over here and kind of live your life and do what you do, you know, and investing broadly in the space, you know, does kind of make sense. And so, you know, finding funds that are going to give you, you know, geographic diversity, that are going to give you asset class diversity, you know, it may not be a terrible way to go, but then I kind of get out of real estate altogether and I'm like, oh, well, then maybe we should just stay on the equity side because, you know, that's always done really well for us. So it's a really hard problem to thread. And I think it's about interest and where you want to take it, right? If getting into real estate is kind of your toehold into doing it the way that we've been doing it, where you're really going out and evaluating properties and sponsors and, you know, taking title on these deals, then I think it's a great way to do it. And I learned this from my dad, where, you know, we'd look at an investment class that we hadn't done before, and you know, he would say, okay, like we don't know anything about this, let's just give them $25,000. And I was like, what's the point, right? Like, that's not a meaningful enough investment that it's going to make any kind of a difference. Why are we doing this? He's like, because if I give them $25,000, then you're actually going to read the reports and pay attention to what they have to say, and you're going to call them with questions, and you're going to learn from this, and like the $25,000 will be a great, investment in your education on this. And so like that really screams true to me, right?
Smart.
My friend Megan that came in on this deal with us, she's never done that kind of a real estate transaction, but you better believe, that she's going to read every single report that ever comes
Yep.
out.
Disseminate
And
everything.
yeah, and it's going to be amazing for her. So
I have the same question really quick in terms of how you vet on the front end. You said we're very active so that we can be passive. So same question for somebody maybe younger or budding in to this whole arena in syndication. If you had to say one or two things, the most important things on vetting a sponsor, because we're very proactive on understanding the quality of a sponsorship team, because you always have to evaluate the team and the deal, but just in who you work with. And you said being comfortable. What's maybe one or two top things, and you got to find this out about that team or that operator?
yeah, there's way more than one or two things, but the top things.
I know. It's like if you could only pick two things.
The first is just alignment from a financial perspective, right? It- you know, there are so many hidden costs in investing in real estate. It's really important to understand what is going to the sponsor
Understand their waterfall or their, yep. Okay.
and just the hidden things like what's going to their affiliates and, what's kind of a set fee versus a performance-based fee. I look at a lot of these deals, and there's so much money being pulled out just in fees alone, and then the waterfall starts.
Yep, and there's so many passive investors that think that those waterfalls are all the same,
Right.
or that the PPM is written this. They're all different. You have to read through everything.
You really do. And so that's the first place that I start. It's like, hey, let's list out every single fee that's coming out of this deal that's going to you or an affiliate of your company. Because the rest of them, there's no incentive, right? So that's fine. So I really spend a lot of time understanding that piece of it. And then also just understanding, like, how much skin do they have in the game? Nowadays, people are raising GP funds, so the GPs aren't actually putting any money into these deals. And that's kind of scary, right? Like, they have no incentive not to walk away from a bad deal because they're not going to lose any money on that. And so,
And if they do that, they better have a really great transaction history and have a lot of deals gone full cycle where they have confidence in their ability.
yeah, I mean, the only GP, so I've only ever invested in one GP fund, and the reason I did it was because the sponsors had already put up a very, very large stack of capital. This was just to help them kind of finish the deals that they had already started. And so, we did do one, but in general, it's kind of a scary place to be because I think it just absolves them of any responsibility for it, which is kind of scary. And then the second thing is just people are people, right? Like, everything is a relationship. And so, I think it's just really important to know who you're getting into bed with, right? Like, who are these people? What are their backgrounds? Why are they doing what they're doing? Are they going to be there for the long haul? Because for us, it's the really long haul. And everyone that I've ever done a transaction with, like, I know really, really well. Like I said, they've met my kids, I've met their kids. We text on a fairly regular basis. And it's a small community out there. And so, when I have a new deal that I'm working on, I'll send it to my old sponsor and I'll say, hey, like, poke holes in this for me and tell me why I shouldn't do the deal. And I love that, right? Like, I love getting that negative viewpoint, even if there's, something in it for them for me to not do the deal. It's still nice to see
Still good
them.
feedback.
Yeah, exactly. So just, understand what you're paying and understand who you're paying it to, I think, are the two biggest things in any kind of investing, but specifically in real estate.
Yeah, that's huge. And something you mentioned that is, I think, very unique to the real estate industry, as far as I've been able to tell, is that collaboration. I've had this conversation multiple times with, a friend of mine, for example, was in contracting before real estate. And he said, if I would have went to my competitor and said, hey, how do you write a bid? they would have laughed him out of the door. They probably would have swore at him, maybe even thrown something at him on the way out. But in real estate, I mean, many people are so open about sharing, what's working, what's not working, and it's one thing we love is we're kind of in the middle where there hasn't been many people that are looking out for the passive investor and also supporting the sponsors, but it can be done in this industry because it is so collaborative.
It's really neat. I really, really like that aspect of it. Like, at no time have I gotten, oh, why are you doing that deal? You should do my deal, kind of thing. It's always like, let me help you kind of evaluate this on its merits. And that goodwill definitely comes around the other way, right? Like, if I have an investor that's right for their deal, like, I'll send them their way. So I think you're right, Christian. Like, I really like that collaboration in real estate.
Absolutely. Well, I know that we're short on time here, but you guys have a house here locally in Utah. When you're in town next, we'd love to have you to the studio again, maybe to have an additional show, because you guys do bring such a unique perspective. And I think if people can learn from your long-term view, it's going to help them with their wealth preservation.
Thanks. We'd love that.
Okay, sounds good.
Shalabh, Eesha, thank you.
Yes, thanks for joining us, everybody, for another edition of the CRE Syndicate.
Thanks.
Psst, passive investors. We've unlocked the #1 secret to finding performing passive real estate opportunities. We want to bring this secret to investors like you. If you're ready to build wealth with real estate like the ultra-rich do, click below to find out more.